recognizes the ranking member for opening statement. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement. I yield back.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Distinguished gentlelady from California, Mary Bono. Gentlelady is recognized.
Chair now recognizes
the lady from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to introduce Congresswoman Mary Bono, former U.S. Representative for California's Inland Empire and Desert Region from 1998 to 2013.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Welcome to Sagely Speaking. I'm your host, Mary Bono, and I'm so happy you're here. On this podcast, I hope to bring you insightful conversations with a variety of guests from all walks of life, people with stories, wisdom, and perspectives that inspire and inform. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe. And if you feel inspired, leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more listeners like you. Now let's dive into today's conversation. I am so pleased to bring in this episode's guest. He's a man I have known as a friend for about a decade or so. I've watched him work hard and build something that was phenomenal. Scott Strode, who's been sober for over 25 years, which is so admirable. He is the executive director of The Phoenix, which is a transformational nonprofit he founded in 2006. Scott, welcome to Sagely Speaking.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's good to catch up. I was thinking about it when I logged in. It's been a little bit since we talked, so I'm excited to update you. Phoenix has been up to a bunch.
I want to hear all about it. But it's been a while that we've talked because you're so busy.
I know.
First, let's start with The Phoenix. So what exactly is The Phoenix?
Yeah, so The Phoenix is a free, sober, active community. I don't like to think of it really as an organization. It's more of a movement because so much of our programming is run by volunteers across the country. And most of our volunteers are people impacted by substance use. So it could be a loved one, an ally, a supporter, or somebody with lived experience who they themselves are in recovery and they're wanting to help others get out of that burning building, which is addiction. And we use any meaningful activity. It could be a bike ride, a hike, yoga class, led by these individuals, sort of framed in our ethos, which is we're here to lift each other up, not pull each other down. And in that simple framing, we've helped over 500,000 people who are stepping into the recovery journey.
Wow. Over 500,000 people? That's astounding. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks. It's pretty amazing. You know, now I travel around with my Phoenix shirts and gear on and people are like, oh man, you go to Phoenix? And I was like, yeah, I go wherever I can. So it's kind of neat to bump into people just even at airports who are Phoenix members.
That's quite the club. But you said it's free. You don't have to pay a membership. You just show up. And what are the prerequisites for working out with your team?
Yeah, as I said, it's free. You basically have to have 48 hours of continuous recovery before you come. So you can sort of dip your toe in if you're trying on sobriety or recovery. But we also wanted a low threshold to entry because if somebody does relapse, we want them to re-engage right away. We don't want them out there and turn a 2-day relapse into 2 years. We want to scoop you right back up with love and get you back into Phoenix programs. And you only need to be 48 hours sober and adhere to that ethos. That's the only cost of admission.
How do you fund this if it's free and you're all around the country? That's an interesting business model.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, it's really probably not that surprising to you because you have a window into this world, but what it costs to bring a Phoenix to a community, which is done primarily through philanthropic donations to the Phoenix, is essentially what it costs to keep 2 people incarcerated for a year. And I can guarantee you there's dozens and dozens of folks that are no longer incarcerated because people have brought Phoenix to communities across the country. So we have angel donors who've invested in us, come into their towns, their communities. And then we've had, business entrepreneurs who have a philanthropic heart, who have seen our vision of trying to serve millions of folks. And they've invested in our technology and our regional volunteer activation capability. So now anywhere that somebody wants to start the Phoenix, they can be the person that brings hope to their community.
You mentioned relapse. Ordinarily, that's a very scary thing. Oftentimes it's stigmatized.
Yeah.
But you have an entirely a new approach to that. And of course, that approach is what resonates with me. Relapse is no different than coming out of remission if you're in cancer or any other disease. But what does happen? So, and you're able to reach out and pull them back in and give them the community camaraderie that they need, the support they need? What does that look like?
It basically is just the Phoenix volunteers and staff across the country saying, what went wrong? What are you doing different? And we miss you and love you and we want you back. And by tomorrow you have 48 hours. So get back in here as quick as you can. And then we also started to realize that the Phoenix as one organization couldn't sort of solve all the challenges on that continuum of healing and recovery. So on our mobile app, we started to bring on partner organizations, and those partner organizations each work on a unique facet of the healing journey. Like, for example, there's a group called Seek Healing, and Seek Healing helps people through peer-led support groups process and let go of trauma. And through that process, you're starting to get to the root cause of why you were drinking and using in the first place. And Phoenix is helping Seek Healing members find support in recovery, and Seek Healing is helping Phoenix members find support in healing from those things. There's other partners like Smart Recovery and She Recovers, and there's just a bunch of different groups, about 50 organizations on our platform now that are working in a collaborative way to support people in this journey.
That's amazing. But since you founded the Phoenix in 2006, what has changed in the addiction field? And obviously the challenges now of fentanyl, and it's been down this road a long time, since 2006. But has anything changed in your world or from your perspective, or all that matters is let's keep opening these gyms and get people in? Or gyms, or I know you do the retreats in, say, Moab, Utah.
Yeah.
You do a lot. So what has changed in your eyes, if anything?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what has changed from what I've seen from when Phoenix started is that the lethality of the opioid crisis, sort of how we have to scoop people up as quickly as we can, because sadly we lose far too many people to fentanyl and opioid overdoses. We've seen deaths of despair increase around, suicide on mental health related things. And I do think addiction recovery is sort of the one side of the same coin as mental health. Like, you have to be supporting mental well-being and mental health to sustain long-term recovery. So I think those two things are linked so closely. And I think, sadly, I haven't seen massive innovations in the space. And it's interesting because in the private sector, we see there's this term called creative destruction. Like, let's build something so much more impactful tomorrow that the things we have of today become obsolete. We're not really bringing that same mindset to how we're approaching addiction in our country. And I think we should, because that's how we're going to get out of the box transformational approaches like the Phoenix and like our technology platform, which we're hoping next year to add 500 partner nonprofits to that platform and become a marketplace of healing from addiction and mental health. But if we don't start stimulating that with our funding, and if donors aren't trying to drive creative destruction, how they're deploying funds in the space, I think sadly we'll be leaning on the things that were created 30 years ago or even older, where we only have 12-step, we have medication-assisted treatment, and we have sort of the Betty Ford or Karen model of inpatient treatment, which are all great things, but we need more tools in the toolbox.
They are all great things and an important part in the toolbox, but you're right. And when you were watching COVID unfold, did you have thoughts on, holy cow, look at how the government's responding to this? And it's been years of drip, 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 drip in the addiction space. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a mindset thing, because I think we see people as a problem to be managed who are struggling with addiction, or we see them sort of as a blight on our communities because we see them out on our streets and we see them on street corners and sort of open drug markets in certain parts of our major cities. And as opposed to seeing them for the intrinsic strength that they have, and that they have this dignity and this ability, if we get them out of that burning building, to be able to help others get out of the burning building too. And that's my own story. Got into recovery, and the Phoenix wouldn't be here without my own recovery. Well, how many other incredible innovations would we see if we can get these folks that have been struggling to be part of the solution alongside us? And I think that mindset could really change things. And I think too, Phoenix had to evolve during COVID, and we launched our virtual programming, our live stream, and we realized we probably should have had that 10 years ago, So now we have sort of on-demand content that people can access in prisons. You can come to Phoenix workouts there on these educational tablets and then find us in your community when you return home. And we have live stream programming. So if you need to connect today, right now, you can get into our app and find something.
Were you ever told this would never be possible? It's not going to work when you decided to start this whole Phoenix movement?
I did have people sort of, raise an eyebrow and say, I don't quite get it. Like, you're just going to ride bikes with people that are in recovery and you're in recovery and that's somehow going to help them. Don't they have to want it? Don't they have to be ready? Don't they have to go to inpatient treatment programs or whatever these things are? And the thing is, when I stood on top of a mountain for the first time when I became a climber, I saw something in my heart that I wasn't able to see from down here on flat ground, and I just wanted to take other people up there with me. And that's really what the Phoenix was about. It's finding that innate courage that we all have and that innate strength we all have within us and helping people find places to express that strength. And then that starts to overflow into other parts of your life, including your recovery journey. So it's a really simple model, but in the early days, I think people didn't quite get it. They're like, wait, you're not clinicians, you're not doctors. And I think moving away from this sort of expert model, we in community can help each other heal. And that could be from everything and not just addiction.
Oh, the healing power of community, of arms around you is undeniable. But tell me about that moment on the mountaintop, though. What happened? What did you see? What was the vision you had or the epiphany that came to?
Yeah. I mean, I think it would happen sort of slowly over time because I'm really open about this. And one of the reasons I wanted to write Rise, Recover, Live, my book, is that I wanted to bring this idea of the root cause behind addiction for many of us, I think, is in trauma and adverse experience and environmental traumas as kids. And I had a father with untreated mental health struggles, and I had a stepfather with untreated alcoholism. And those created very different and dynamic worlds when I was a kid. And what I didn't realize at the time is it was creating these self-esteem wounds for me because I kind of viewed it all as my fault. When you're a little kid, you frame things that way. And so when I got to the age when I first found drugs or alcohol, it kind of made that pain go away for a little bit. And of course, it started failing me as soon as it became a coping mechanism. But I think that's true for so many. And I just know, because my own experience, the first time I tied into a climbing rope and got to the top of a climb, it started to break that lens that I saw the world through. And I started to think, maybe I am strong. Maybe I can accomplish the things I put my mind to. And I wanted to share that with others. And that was really where the Phoenix came from.
It's important to note, in my view, it doesn't have to be the top of a mountain. And, I live in the mountains. I live in the Rocky Mountains. But for many people, it's fly fishing or just hiking. And I know you talk about hiking, but we can all find that inner peace or those moments out in nature that are so important to recognize that there's a big, beautiful world out there that is bigger than us and our problems. Yeah. And so I think for people like me who have no desire to climb into anything, I have a fear of heights. So I will stick with my fly fishing, but it is important. It can be many things. And my producer, Kim, and my intern, Kate, we all choose to live in the mountains. And it's because we love these experiences and we get them just randomly. A sunrise, a sunset, a deer, an elk walking. The amount of photos we send each other that are of the silliest thing that just inspire us or relax us or excite us. It's just easy to find. But okay, so one of the world's most busy men, you, Scott Strode, writes a book called Rise, Recover, and Thrive. How long did it take you to write it, and what's it all about?
Yeah, I mean, it took really an intentional year set aside to do it alongside building this Phoenix movement. But I had been sort of capturing these little sort of vignettes and stories from my life over the last decade because I anticipated someday wanting to tell this story. And I would just encourage everyone to do that. Like, if you have a meaningful moment and you don't journal, just try to capture that moment. And I think even those things you just talked about being in the outdoors, standing in the water, fly fishing, and you watch the sun come up, those are those awe moments that sort of really fill our heart and fuel our soul. And they don't have to be as big as climbing a mountain or whatever, but capture them, write them down, talk about how you're trying to approach raising your family differently than how you were raised maybe, or what kind of opportunities you want to give the people you care about, or how you support each other, and jot them down. Because for me, as I started to accumulate them in one place that became the book, I realized that a lot of it you forget if you don't start to capture it. And there's so many stories in there that I think can inspire the world to think about how we approach addiction differently, but also just how we help each other rise from whatever we're recovering from in life. I always say we're all in recovery from something, and I talk about that quite a bit in the pages.
I have to say something that I just realized in listening to you and to myself. It's not that you have to be in the mountains or out in nature to find moments of awe and recovery. Of course, they happen in the cities. And oftentimes they happen with the kindness of a stranger, but there are beautiful moments there too. Or sometimes you can seek out beauty going to a museum or going to a park, taking your dog for a walk. So I just want to say that I'm not a mountain snob. These things exist. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 25 years part-time, and I still love that city. And there are plenty of awe-inspiring moments in the city too. So I think it's important to get that out there, because just because you're sitting in traffic doesn't mean you can't find a peaceful moment too, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's so great you brought that up, because when you hear us talk about being in the mountains or whatever, it might seem so far away from where somebody listening is. But I think the real power of awe is in those moments, a sunrise, a sunset, a moment of peace where you just get to listen to your kids laugh, or even just a minute where you just are sort of doing whatever you're best at your highest level. And you start to realize, like, this is sort of that flow state. This is where I really feel at home, whether it's being a carpenter, building a house, or whatever it is, helping somebody at work. But I think what really is magic is when we get to witness others triumph and thrive. And we can help do that by sharing our lived experience with others. That's what's so special about recovery, I think, is I know what it was like to be in that valley, that dark place in my addiction, but I also know that I was able to ascend into the light as I'm climbing up this sort of mountain of recovery. And so being there for others, by helping them, I'm actually starting to help myself too. And that's why our volunteer program is so special. There's people across the country that already have walked through the difficult part of the path of life and can help those that are coming behind them navigate it. And so it doesn't matter if you're in DC or Manhattan or in Appalachia or wherever you are, you can be a guide to somebody else. And a good example of this is we talk about at the Phoenix that the heaviest weight in our gym is the front door, because it's hard to pull open without a drink or a drug in your system, maybe for the first time in your adult life, and it can be intimidating. But as soon as you do that, you now have something you can share with the person behind them, because you can hold that door open for them and make it easier for them to walk through. And that's how we share our unique gifts to ultimately help each other heal.
We'll continue with our interview in a moment, but first I'd like to thank my sponsors. Lucy Pet Foods is the leader in gut health. Their formulas for life feature prebiotic, balanced fiber that nourishes your dog and cat's total health. Every purchase helps support the Lucy Pet Foundation, a 501c3 charity helping animals. Save 15% off your first order and use the promo code SAGELYSPEAKING, all one word, and you will get free shipping at lucypetfoods.com. If you're committed to tackling the opioid and addiction crises, then you need to be at the 2025 RX Summit. Use code SAGELY, that's SAGELY, for an extra $100 off. Join top experts and professionals as we share strategies for prevention, deflection, treatment, and recovery. Don't miss this chance to be part of the change. Head over to rx-summit.com to register now. That's rx-summit.com for an additional $100 off. Mothers for Awareness and Prevention of Drug Abuse, driving solutions to prevent drug abuse and overdose deaths by focusing on prevention through education and awareness. And now, back to our interview.
What are your demographics? What are your ages and male to
Yeah,
female
we very,
ratio?
very closely match the communities in which we're in. And I would say the concentration is really sort of mid-20s to mid-30s. But I think it's shifting, it's expanding, because I think the younger folks coming up now aren't as sort of indoctrinated into some of the older mental models about recovery. Like, they're very open about their recovery journey. They're posting about it on social media. They're empowered by stepping into recovery. And I think there's a health and well-being culture where people are starting to realize that really no amount of alcohol is that good for your body, right? So just trying to live a more present life where you're not sort of pouring that stuff into your system. So there's Sober Curious and mocktails, and Phoenix is really trying to capture this cultural moment by shifting culture in and around music. We have a program called 1 Million Strong, where we're trying to create these sober supportive spaces at music festivals and venues. And our goal of serving 1 million people, which we set 5 years ago, I think we're going to achieve it early next year. And what's really wild is I think in the next 5 years, we're going to serve 6 to 10 million people with Phoenix programs. So we're just getting started, and it's only going to go up from here.
You mentioned mocktails, and I do dry January. I am not sober. I don't abuse alcohol or drugs, but dry January is important to me. Usually I stretch it through middle of February or so. Mocktails, though, drive me crazy because I also don't like sugar. I do my best to avoid sugar. So the best mocktail for me that has no alcohol, no sugar is just water.
Yep.
Or, of course, I'm creating all of these things with various sugar substitutes, but it's mocktails. I go to a restaurant, I look at the list, it's like sugar, 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 sugar. And boy, they sound so good. But if anybody's listening who's in the bar business, please come up with mocktails with no alcohol and no sugar. That would be very helpful to somebody like me. But how would a community go about trying to build a Phoenix?
Yeah, I mean, there's a simple way, which is people can go into the App Store and find the Phoenix, a sober community, download the app. And if we don't have events near you, it geolocates where you are. If we don't have them, you can be prompted to become a volunteer, and you can be the one that starts it. And then the other way is that if a philanthropist wants to bring us to a community or help us focus our organizational capabilities at that community, then they can donate and help us expand into new markets. And, if somebody really has that vision of transformation, of how to change this at scale, I think the best way to support is to donate towards the advancement of our app. Because I can imagine a world where there'll be thousands of nonprofit organizations that work around addiction and mental health on our platform, and we'll be creating a real continuum of care, because what I needed at 2 days sober and what I needed at 20 years sober are very different. And when we're in true sort of digital community, we can put in front of people the resource they need at the time of life that they're in.
Do you have a model that partners with existing gyms who might just say, partner with you all for a certain portion of a day or a time?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually how we grow in communities, is so if somebody owns a CrossFit gym or a boxing gym or a yoga studio, and they just want to give us some off-peak hours that we can run Phoenix programs, then we get our local volunteers to activate that space. And it's not all fitness related. We do art, we do music, it could be a book club. Phoenix really can be anything, any meaningful activity. It could be just a coffee social on a Sunday morning somewhere. So that's how we grow. If a local entrepreneur wants to share their space with us, that gives us a home in that community to run programs.
Well, my wheels are turning. Look out, Durango, Colorado.
Love it. That's great.
There are significant dollars out there now. When you started this, when we started our advocacy well over a decade ago, it was very difficult to find money or funding. It was very difficult to get the attention of lawmakers. It was somebody else's problem, not going to happen there. The stigma was in the way of progress. But are you finding any government funding or funding from what we call the multi-district litigation, settlement dollars that have come from the opioid manufacturers and distributors? Is there funding there for you all? I mean, for you and for everybody who wants to start one. Can these, we have in Southwest Colorado, an opioid response district. And could they help champion request funds and then build a Phoenix?
Absolutely. I mean, that we are receiving some of that funding in some of our locations. We do sometimes get parts of block grant funding or federal funding that's coming to the states. And, I think I've seen some more hopeful things coming out of, the National Institute of Health and SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Human Service. You probably know
Mental Health Services Administration. It's definitely an alphabet soup, an acronym. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've seen some hopeful stuff coming out of SAMHSA and National Institute of Health around a different way of approaching this issue. But I think the challenge is that too often what's coming out of DC is sort of hatched in these more academic circles of an idea of what would be best. And they're looking at sort of evidence-based practices that were sort of research studies done, a decade ago. And then it comes down through academia, and that's what they decide that we're going to fund. I think we really need to look at innovations in communities. We need to talk to people about what they really need and be creative. That's why I think just philanthropic dollars can always outperform those federal dollars, because they bet on innovation. And if we really try to incentivize creative destruction in the nonprofit sector, I think we can get there. The problem as a nonprofit leader is that if you have a thing you do and that thing gets funded, you just try to sell that same thing again and again to other funders often. What I love is the partnership where you sit down with funders and they say, what would be really transformational? If you rebuilt Phoenix today to really try to address this issue, what would you do differently? And we want to bet on that. That's the kind of philanthropy I think that can change the addiction crisis.
I run a small nonprofit, very small compared to yours, Mothers for Awareness and Prevention of Drug Abuse. But I feel the same way. I love the philanthropic dollars because, again, you're not tied to anything. You're not filling out a grant request because it's what they tell you must do. So I'm learning a lot from talking to you, but that's nothing new. But tell me what your vision is for the next, say, 5 years, 10 years. And again, I'm hearing your vision is you don't know, because you're going to ride along and transform as needed. And so I just asked a question, then I answered it myself. My apologies. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my dream is that every single person who's been touched by addiction or mental health struggles can be empowered to be part of the solution. And that doesn't mean just people with lived experience. It means loved ones, allies, supporters. It also means civically minded people in communities and people that work around this issue, whether you're a probation officer or correctional officer or prosecutor or whatever it is in the criminal legal space. But if everybody could share one of their unique gifts with others to help that person rise by becoming a volunteer, it doesn't have to be with the Phoenix. It could be through other organizations out there, but that is one thing. So at the community level, we have this bottom-up solution that continues to drive forward. But I also think in the technology space, this next 5 years is going to be building our mobile app into this platform of healing. And we want to utilize all the same technologies that other large platforms use. But the difference is that every click and swipe and algorithm and AI tool is actually moving you closer to healing and thriving and a life of self-actualization. And if we could build that platform, that I think is something that could really change the world.
Scott, this can sound like I'm pushing back a little bit, and I don't mean to be. I do mean to probe here. But how do you take, when we've agreed, the camaraderie of walking into the gym, heaviest weight being the door, and then you're with fellowship, are we not decentralizing that and removing the human interaction that is such an important component of recovery and mental health?
We're doing two things, I think. We're bringing in at a high level tools that many of us can't access because they're so fragmented and spread out across a sector that is really difficult to navigate. So if you think about right now, if somebody messaged you and I and said, I have a loved one who needs help and they live in this town and here's their insurance, can you get them into a program? It would take us probably the whole week with resources and other Phoenix staff helping us and reaching out to partners and friends to find the right place for that person to land and find support. And we might not even have that time because of how lethal this issue is. So I do think we need a place where we're bringing together the top resources and creating a pathway for people to access them quickly. But the beauty of what the Phoenix is trying to build in our tech is that it is then connecting you locally to people with the same experience. So you might get there and find this upskilling workforce development program and this trauma healing workshop through Seek Healing, but you'll also find the Phoenix in your neighborhood and the stuff that's happening there. So the difference is it's not just through our screen on our phone that we're finding the resource. That screen is now leading you to actual people who are there for you when you're having a tough day. And that's the difference, I think, from what we see currently with like social media. This is more of digital community that leads you to in-person community.
I understand very well the model of 48 hours sober. But does Phoenix House get involved in primary prevention in any way, shape, or form to say to young kids, students, teenagers, just don't even use? Don't start, do you?
Yeah.
Or is that just not in your mission statement?
It's the Phoenix doesn't really focus on like youth prevention and early intervention, but it is a dream of mine. I think when we really build our digital platform and we focus on serving the 6 to 10 million people in the next 5 years, I always in the back of my mind have this sort of investable opportunity for philanthropists, which is standing up our youth prevention and early intervention program. Because if I had found my way to that climbing rope and got to the top of that climb when I was 15, maybe I wouldn't have had to create so much pain in the lives of the people I love and in my own life. And because I would have found a nurturing community and a positive coping mechanism sooner. So I've always wanted to really dive deep into youth prevention and early intervention. And the Phoenix model is perfect for it because it's bringing peers together and empowering each other towards the dreams we have in life. And the sooner we get to start solutioning on those dreams, I think that's the inoculation from our addiction, stripping away the things that we're imagining are possible for us.
Well, when you delve into prevention, I would love to be a part of your entrepreneurial spirit and everything that you're doing with it, because that is where my heart is most. But lastly, families suffer. You just mentioned it. Families suffer so much when they love somebody who's struggling with a substance use disorder. It's a very painful experience for a family, for a spouse, for a parent, for a child. Do you do anything to help families who are suffering, or is that in your future plan too?
Yeah, we already do, in that Phoenix is for anyone who's been impacted by substance use. So we have family members who come, and sometimes tragically they couldn't help their loved one, and they're ultimately their loved one succumbed to their addiction, but they can come and be part of a community that's helping everyone rise. There's this framework we use. It's actually from the mental health space called CHIME. And it's connectedness, hope, identity, meaning, and belonging. CHIME B is sort of what we think of. But the higher your CHIME score, I believe, the closer you are to living a life where you're thriving. And we see the CHIME score of allies and supporters also go up by being part of Phoenix. So not only does it change for folks like myself who are in recovery and had to be because of their relationship with substances, but for the kid who lost a mom and now is the volunteer of one of our weekend workout classes, she's also having a cathartic moment by being here, and her life is changing. And surprise, nurturing community can help us all heal, right? So it's a pretty simple approach to it, but it has a really meaningful outcome for folks.
You better be careful, because you're so good at what you do. Somebody's going to try to come give you an appointment to some administration position and snap you up and
If
put
they
you
let
in
me
charge
drive,
of something.
If I can drive creative destruction there too, I'd do it. But they have to let me sort of blow up the things that aren't working and roll out new and innovative things. And we have to be able to put our ear to the ground and listen to what's happening in our communities, as opposed to what's coming out of a white paper that was written 10 years ago.
And you're preaching to the choir with me so much. It is, we're so far behind there. And I think your words are going to resonate with a lot of people. I think it's what people are clamoring for. Forget about the election that happened and how people are so divided. But the notion of taking something that hasn't been working and figure out what hasn't been working and fix it and change it is sort of common sense. But tell us, so your book, you can get it anywhere. Of course, for me, that would be downloading it on Amazon to my iPad, Kindle app, but I'm sure your book is available.
Yeah, it's in pre-sale now, and you can, after January 7th, it'll start shipping to people, or you can download it that day. But I'm excited about it because it kind of touches on what you just shared there at the end, where we do feel divided as a country, and we have othered each other. We see too often, our communities as those people and us. And that's the truth when it comes to addiction too. You see active addiction in your community, you think about, those people on our streets or whatever it is. The truth is we're all the same, right? We all have the same innate strength. We all deserve the same dignity. We all have the ability to lift each other up. And I think that the Phoenix, this group of folks that we see as on the fringe of our communities, if we can build an empowerment movement within Phoenix, then anyone can do that. And we can bridge the divides in our society more broadly. And that's what I think the Phoenix is starting to model. And it's being modeled by people with an ankle monitor on and, a crooked nose from one too many fights and coming out of homelessness. But when you walk into a Phoenix event, we fist bump, we high five, we grab each other's hands, and we help lift each other up. And I think as a country, we can do that for each other too.
Maybe you need a whole chapter for people in political recovery.
That's right. They're welcome too. Just 48 hours of sobriety.
48 hours. How about 48 hours not talking about politics?
That works
and no
too.
fights over the holiday dinner tables, but website where people can go.
Yeah.
And by the way, will you include your book tour dates on that website?
Yeah, there'll be more information on there. Thephoenix.org is where you can learn more about the Phoenix, and just scottstrode.com is where you can follow the book tour dates and some lives, Facebook lives, and other things I'll be doing throughout the book launch if you want to join for those.
Well, thank you. And I assume on the Phoenix website, there's a big red button that says donate here.
Yeah, you can donate and be the angel donor that brings Phoenix to your community. Or if you want to help fuel the movement and help us drive creative destruction, you can email us at info@thephoenix.org and I'll get in touch with you and we'll figure out how to work together on it.
Well, Scott, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You are such an entrepreneur, such a breath of fresh air. And I love watching everything you've done. And I know you're going to succeed so much more. I also wouldn't be surprised if somebody swoops you up and puts you somewhere else to fix something else that needs fixing. But I really want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for being a pioneer. You've plowed the road for many folks in the recovery movement by making space for this issue and lifting it up. And you're doing it today again, and by telling the story. So appreciate you and everything you've done, and the recovery movement appreciates you. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a labor of love, as you know. But I also want to say thank you very much to those of you who are listening today. I hope you found this episode as fascinating and inspirational as I did. I know I'm going to follow Scott and watch carefully everything that they're doing. So thank you for listening. To my sponsors, thank you very much for supporting Sagely Speaking. For without you, we couldn't be here at all. So until we meet again, be well.